and welcome back to another week of Behind the Lens. I'm Debbie Elias, film critic, creator, and host of Behind the Lens, where we go behind the lens and below the line with the movers and shakers, the film and TV makers, the producers, the writers, the directors, the actors, the cinematographers, production designers, costume designers, sound mixers, sound editors, film editors, composers, book authors even. Hopefully we're going to have a book author coming up in a few weeks here. And you name it, we talk to them. I actually am trying to get some grips on the show because so many of these little jobs, people, they hear it, they see it on the credits when they stay for the credits, which you really should be doing with every film, people. Sit through the credits. But they don't know what they do. And some of my besties are grips who work over at Sony, as a matter of fact. So I'm trying to get some of the guys to maybe do a call-in or actually come in studio and talk to us about what grips do and how they work in connection with the cinematographers. So I'm hoping that I can put that together for all of you in the coming months. But today, I'm very excited about today's show. I teased you last week. I have been dying. Spinning Gold is out on Friday. And last week, on the 16th, I spoke with Tim Bogart, the writer-director. Tim Bogart is also the son of Neil Bogart, music producer and founder of Casablanca Records. He is the man who helped create and put on their path to stardom Donna Summer, the Isley Brothers, Kiss. You know the music. You know the songs. For many of us in my age bracket, this is what we were listening to in the 70s when we were in high school. These are the artists, the songs. Neil Bogart helped shape the taste, the musical taste of so many of us. And to see his story be brought to life on screen and done by his son. You wonder how it's going to be. Within minutes, I fell in love with the film. It is truly one of my favorite films of the year. And the needle drops, the music, it is the soundtrack of the 70s, the soundtrack of my life and many of your lives. It's amazing. And I was so excited to get to speak with Tim because, you know, when you're telling a story about your parent, it can be daunting. A lot of trepidation involved, especially somebody with a parent as famous as Neil Bogart. And we covered everything. The interview is amazing. And you should be hearing that in the second half of the show. And I'll get into it more then, and you'll hear more. And I've noticed on social media, I just want to point this out about Spinning Gold, people. I'm seeing people post on social media. They're seeing trailers. They're seeing clips. They're seeing some amazing clips of Tyler Parks, who plays Donna Summer. You have to remember that what Tim was going for with this film in casting the players of these eventually very well-known talents, he wanted the essence of who these people are. He was not going for a Bohemian Rhapsody, Rami Malek level performance as Freddie Mercury. He wanted the essence because this film follows Neil Bogart's journey and the journey of all of these artists. George Clinton, Donna Summer, Kiss, and so many, Gladys Knight. Neil Bogart he helped shape them. He took Donna Summer, he took her from being LaDonna Gaines to being Donna Summer. Intimate moments in the film. It's not Gene Simmons and Neil Bogart talking. It's son of an immigrant, Neil Bogart, talking with Gene Simmons as an immigrant child. The intimacy levels of the film are just absolutely outstanding. Outstanding. And truly something that I hope everybody sees. The film will be in theaters this Friday. And don't mind me, if you're listening on the adrenalineradio.com Facebook page and looking, yes, and I'm looking at my phone only because our first caller should have been calling in. And so far, I don't see the phone ringing, and neither does Pam. So, what we may end up doing here, Pam, is reversing things. And rather than do my interview with Tim Bogart the second half of the show, do it now. While I try and find out what's going on, because supposedly joining us live on the show today is MOSTAFA KESHVARI, writer-director of this new film, Colorblind, which is out digitally on April the 4th. It is a beautiful film. It's an amazing film. It is the story of a colorblind mother and son who face racial and social injustice. The really exciting thing about Colorblind is that it is also the first film that is with a collaboration with color scientists, so that color blindness is actually portrayed and displayed accurately in the film. So there are scenes when we're seeing things from the perspective of the young 9-year-old boy, Monet. He only sees in black and white, whereas his mother, Magdalene, she has a different type of color blindness where she sees shades of colors, but they may not be the actual color that you and I, with normal color-sightedness, see. And interwoven in there, besides this very personal relationship with the science here, it's a great platform for the racial and social injustices that have been happening in the world. And in fact, it was the whole George Floyd incident that inspired MOSTAFA to write this film. But hopefully he will be calling in to us. I think we're going to go ahead and we're going to start the the interview with the wonderful Tim Bogart, writer-director of Spinning Gold. So go ahead, Pam.
Hey, Tim.
Hey, how are you?
I have to tell you, Tim, I am so in love with Spinning Gold. I am crazy about this film. I talked with Byron last week and was just gaga with him, talking about all the visual tonal bandwidth and the visuals and covering 3 decades. And now I get to talk with you, the creator of all of this. But boy, oh boy, I wanted the film to be longer, in all honesty.
Thank you for that. Well, by the way, there could have been probably another 10 hours. There was a lot of story to figure out what to boil it down to.
Well, not just with story, but the needle drops, the songs. My God.
Yeah, I did have quite a hand up in the fact that the music is just so great. It's just some of the best there ever was.
I know. And, like I told Byron, I said, let me tell you, I still have all of my original albums and singles from when all of this music came out back in the 70s. All of my original Casablanca albums have transported it across the country with me from when I was buying this stuff in high school. Still has stickers on it from We 3 Records in the Plymouth Meeting Mall. You kidding me? The music is just amazing, and all I could think of is, how difficult was it to narrow down your needle drops?
It was so difficult, there was a long period of time where we actually, right after shooting, we had quite a bit of the Cameo Records era as well. He actually started, of course, with MGM Records, so you had some. We did obviously have Wooly Bully in there, but he had so many hits during that period of time. And then going to Cameo Parkway, and then Buddha, and then Casablanca, it was extremely hard. Ultimately, we really looked at what songs served the story. I mean, it was very important to us from the very beginning that it not be the kind of film where you got up to one of these great songs and then you just stopped and just listened to those songs. Because as wonderful as they are, I always find in those kind of music films, the narrative tends to stop when it's just giving away the performance. And so what we really were searching for were songs that informed the narrative, songs that informed the characters. And once we did that, things like Death, that really was originally written for Peter Chris's wife, but then they did change the name to Be My Father's Wife, My Mother. So suddenly Death, of course, became consequential. When you're in such a hardship moment, the idea of Lean on Me, like those songs, when they were written, were very important narrative songs. Mm-hmm. So for us, it really became just about what songs served the story ultimately. But even then, right up until the end of production, we still had planned to shoot a whole Curtis Mayfield section. Oh, wow. And we were going to do Superfly, and we were going to do a couple others, and it just ultimately became, to quote the great Amadeus, too many notes.
What was it that prompted you to go on this journey to tell your dad's story? I mean, his story is fascinating, and anybody who is old enough to have followed his career and the various labels that he founded and or worked with over the years, as I did, I knew a lot about your dad just from watching all of his appearances and interviews and keeping up with all that stuff back in the day. But for you, what prompted you to tell this story, which is now going to be so new to, I say, 90% of the audience out there?
I think that's right. He was such a, it sounds like a silly statement because it seems a little bit obvious, but he was such a larger-than-life character. Yes, for music, but just in our lives as a father, he was just this extraordinary force. When he passed away, it happened so quickly. We were really unaware of his illness, frankly, until almost the very end. And so he suddenly had this gigantic hole ripped away. And I think as any child, I was 12 at the time, as any child loses such a significant portion of their life, there becomes a fascination to understand, what degree of haunting you now have by this character that, you only kind of knew. So my fascination with him really started as a son who lost a father, and he was just interested in who that father was. That said, very quickly, maybe almost too quickly, it was maybe only a couple of years when people started knocking on the door about the Broadway rights and the movie rights, and I think it was too raw for the family. We weren't interested in doing anything at that time. But those questions kept coming through the years, and as I started into the business and started doing film and television, it suddenly dawned on me, I have the greatest story that was just gifted to me. Yes, he happened to be my father, but forget that. What a great character! What an implausible and improbable meteoric rise success story. And so, as a storyteller, I suddenly found myself gifted with this extraordinary story that, luckily, because I happened to have been his son, I was in a unique position to try to tell.
Okay, and you're listening to Tim Bogart talking about spinning gold. We're going to stop it right there. Because our live guest, MOSTAFA KESHVARI, he has been found. He is called in. But I promise you, we're going to pick up Tim's interview at that exact moment where we cut it as soon as we finish with MOSTAFA. And you will hear the entire interview on Spinning Gold on the show live today. So, let me just switch gears here. Hey, MOSTAFA,
Hello?
How are you?
Hi, I'm good, thank you. Sorry, I thought we had a Zoom link. That's why I was waiting. I didn't know I had to call in.
Nope, nope, nope. Radio, no
Yes,
Zoom, no Zoom.
yeah, that's
So,
great. Yeah,
but welcome. I have to tell you, I watched Colorblind. It is an exquisite film, Mustafa. It is
thank you so much.
It
Thank you.
is an exquisite film. Visually, it's fascinating. I mentioned at the top of the show that this is, I think, one of the first films to be developed by color scientists so that we actually see what color blindness is. And then you take that and it metaphorically, this film, it's literally, figuratively, metaphorically speaks to racism, social injustice, while the emotionality and the bonding of a mother and a son over colorblindness and how it really does open the world in many respects.
Thank you. Yes. I think that part was for us very important to make sure that we merge art and science together to deliver a unifying message. And I think that was what was unique about the project, to accurately represent colorblindness as a disability, which a lot of people don't know about. And just like how colorblind people don't know they're colorblind, maybe through their whole life or later in life. Same with racism. A lot of people don't know they're racist, but subconsciously they are, and they're just not aware of it. And I think we all have our own colorblindness in some ways.
Well, and I love what you have done, because here we have a mother and a son, Magdalene and Monet. And Magdalene, she is a painter. She is an artist. She herself has one form of color blindness, but she still sees color and sees the world in color, and that gets incorporated into her art, because she knows what she's seeing is a color, but that might not be the color you and I are seeing.
Yes.
But it doesn't take away from the beauty of her work. And then she translates much into grayscale identification for her son Monet. I love the games where, okay, find something blue. This is blue. Find something blue. And looking at the grayscales, he can then start identifying what a color is. But you also give us this wonderful childlike joy of him painting and using vibrant colors that he may or may not recognize just the exact vibrancy and beauty of them. So it's very eye-opening in that regard, but at the same time, it's opening our eyes in terms of the racism issues happening in the world. And it's just beautiful the way you constructed this from a story standpoint.
Thank you. And I think Monet, like the way he sees everything black and white, I wanted to show that children are like that. They're very pure. They see everything like good or bad, and they don't distinguish between races or colors. You're either a good friend or a bad friend.
That's it.
And as we grow up, we have all this other conditioning where we start seeing colors differently, and we start having a distortion view of colors. And what it means to be, even your own skin color, you start questioning that, what it means that I'm this color or that color. So in a way, Monet is a pure form of being a human being without any judgment. And I think all children are not, when we're born, we are not racist. We're like a blank page. And then as we grow up, we have all these, different ideas throughout our experiences. And the question is how, as parents, we teach children about racism, how soon it is to teach them. And when we do, how do we protect them against that? Because the world is not always what they imagine it to be. So again, as a black boy growing up in that neighborhood, he had questions, and I put them in an opposite character. This racist landlord who lives next door is a retired firefighter, and he has to babysit the kid. And the idea of when you put two extreme characters next to each other, how do they respond? Because as grown-ups, when we talk about racism, we don't really listen to each other. We can attack each other and say things, but when you talk to a child, you can't do that. And you try to look at life from their perspective, and in a way, it connects with their inner child. And then the racist old man starts realizing that as a child he didn't have those views on colors, and he wasn't racist. And maybe there's a different way to look at life if you go back to our childhood.
Well, and that's exactly what you have us witness. And I have to say, you knocked it out of the park with casting Trey Maridati as Monet and Gary Chalk as Walton. Those two make this film, Mustafa. They make this film. The dynamic between the two of them, the innocence that Trey brings to Monet, but it's a very wise innocence as well. And I love that about his performance. And to watch what Gary infuses into Walton as he finally realizes and learns that Monet is colorblind, and as is his mother. And this is a big eye-opener. Because, and this is a very interesting thing that you include in the film, is that his mother taught him that you don't tell people because it's a sign of you being weak. And it's that weakness that puts both of them in harm's way. That
I think that's what happens in the schools. Like when you have any sort of disability, you try not to, because right now we want, people to be labeled with different, let's say somebody's like disabled or somebody has different sexual orientation. Like it's good that we labeling that people know about it, but it doesn't mean everybody's going to look at it in a positive way. Some people take advantage of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing is that, in a metaphoric way, being a person of color in a society like that is like being disabled, because there are a lot of advantages you don't have that other people have. And, just being born with a certain color puts you in a kind of like situation that you're not as able as other people to achieve your dreams or become who you want, because you have more obstacles in front of you. So it's also metaphorically talking that there's a lot of symbolism in the film
Very
that
much.
I hope that the audience pick up on. For example, the pomegranate scene, and it represents like just like a pomegranate. The earth represents this pomegranate. There are all different seeds in it, and at the end, like we all have the same color of blood. Like when you squeeze a pomegranate, doesn't matter what color the pomegranate is inside, it's all like red. And we're all like sticking together in this world to survive. Like nobody wants to, basically be a racist or make life harder for someone else. But the way, we set up the society, the way we've been conditioned, we make each other's life harder than it's supposed to be. If we all go back to our childhood and connect with our inner child, the world could be a much better place when we start to connect to each other from that point of view, and just not look at our differences but our similarities. Every person wants to love or be loved, and I think that's the core of the film, where what colors, like we question the meaning of colors, because every species look at color differently. From animals' perspective, colors have different meaning. From scientific way, there are no colors. Everything is just reflection of light. So when we even talk about color, it's very pointless to be proud of our colors or use it as some sort of like prejudice, because colors really have no meaning when it comes to the science of it. And we just give it meanings.
Yeah,
and I think we have to be judged by the color of our soul, our character, who we are inside.
The content of our character, absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, the way you have, number one, how difficult was it putting this script together? Because something that you do is you don't give us a specific place. This could be anywhere. You keep the locations very condensed, a microcosm almost. You've got a multi-layer apartment where Magdalene and Monet live, and Walton lives on top of them. So you've got that metaphoric hierarchy in there.
Yeah.
The white man is on top, the black family is below them. There's a lot of thought that you put into this. And were you thinking of all this when you were writing this script, Mustafa?
I think one of the big challenges was when I wrote this script. It was right after I watched what happened in the U.S. with all the Black Lives Matter movements, and I realized that, I also am a painter at the Federation of Canadian Artists, and I realized like how pointless it is that us looking at colors in this way. And I wrote this script, and I brought it to the community. I had two good friends of mine, black producers, that they looked at the script, and we had also script consultant, and just made it like from there it took a life of its own, and it went through different revisions to represent not just racism in America, but globally. That's why it doesn't have a location. I wanted to show that like racism is not specific to one location or place or time. It's always been there and always be, just like colorblindness. And then with the characters too, it was surprising for me because Chantel, who plays the lead actress, and then Trey, who plays the kid, they've never been given opportunity to play in a feature film as a lead. And a lot of people of color or black characters in the film, they were their first experience even doing a feature film or something as a lead character. So it just shows that when you have that opportunity, they'll shine, and when they're given the opportunity, they really can show and relate with the character what they're going through. So I think script-wise, it took a few months to go and get it to a place where we all feel comfortable, because even within black community, racism is felt differently. If you're in Canada or States or in Europe, depending also which black community you belong to, I found out that we all have our own racism. Even within black community, there is racism. That's what my friends told me. So it's hard to know what racism is and what the experience is, but that's why I wanted to make it more metaphoric and more symbolic, and just talk about the whole idea of looking at colors. And we worked with the color scientists, which was very difficult. They have to mathematically input everything and see what would a colorblind person see the world. What would it look like mathematically, right? And then show that on the screen and from the POV of the characters. So overall, it was a very unique project and challenging, but I'm glad that we went to many different festivals: Vancouver Black Film Festival, Montreal Black Film Festival, Toronto Black Film Festival, and the audience really enjoyed the film, and we had a great reception. And it shows that it's a project that relates to the community, and in a bigger picture, everyone who almost participated in the film experienced racism in one way or the other, including myself. So I think it's a project that is just kind of unifying us and saying that we see, let's see each other in a different color. Let's see each other from the inside out. Like how we are from the inside should be more important than how we are on the outside.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've got to ask you about the whole idea of scientifically working with the colors as to how a colorblind person, be it someone like Magdalene who has tritanopia, or somebody like Monet who is a monochromatic type of color blindness. You work with your cinematographer, Sterling Bancroft, and you have some amazing transitions here as you go from the black and white of Monet's world, and as his mother, as Magdalene, is holding a prism and turning it in the sunlight, we see the colors of the rainbow, the prismatic effect that comes out, and we see it not just in color, but also in the shades of gray that come in the monochromatic world. And that is so stunning. And then you punctuate this film with two incredible montages that are essentially white on white. The one speaks to the idea of a pomegranate with, inside the pomegranate, it's just like people, it's blood red. But stunning. How did you and Sterling develop the visual tonal bandwidth and those visual sequences like that? Because especially those two montages, midway, the white on white pomegranate with the red punctuating, and then the stunning climactic montage at the end. Just beautiful. How did the two of you create this?
I think I remember I talked to Sterling about the pomegranate, for example, that you look at a pomegranate seed and think of it as a human. The seed is white, so you think of it as our bones, and then you have a red, juice around it, and it's basically your blood. And all these pomegranate seeds representing people of the same, group. And then in this case, black people being squeezed and oppressed and pressured, throughout centuries. But they stick together, right? So the idea of how we can show that visually, and that's why we washed out all the colors and almost showed red, showing that that red represents the blood. That at the end of the day, we stick together because, it's all about the blood. When you see that people like dying or going through horrible things, that blood of someone innocent can continue a movement. One person dies, but it saves a lot of other lives because then you have these movements which stops a lot of other prejudice around the world. So I want to show that even one seed can make a big, big difference. And in this case, we try to go with black and white and make it more like a dream sequence where we are in the surreal world of like subconscious of Magdalene, which in that case she's in coma. And the idea of going to coma shows that a lot of like people who experience racism, metaphorically, they're in like coma, because they're not in the society. They kind of like push aside that they exist, but they don't. They are there, but they're not contributing because they kind of give it up on the idea of like they can be a part of society in any way. So a lot of people just like shut down. And I think that's a spiritual coma in some ways, where a lot of people who experience racism or prejudice in an extreme way. And then for the rest of the film, we wanted to show the colorful world of the kids and how children see the world more colorful, even though he sees black and white. When we look at the world around him, it's all colorful. So it's all in the head. I was trying to show that like our suffering and a lot of things can, translate to joy if we look at the world in a different way. So the kid, even though, the mom is trying to protect him from racism and all that, he's created a very colorful world around himself, even though he doesn't see the colors. And I think that's how children grow up. But unfortunately, at some point, we realize that's not how the world is. So it's the mother's perspective. She sees colors this like different way, and she has to imagine colors to paint them because she hasn't seen the true colors too. So the idea of like our imagination can save us and become our hero. When you imagine a better world, when you imagine colors differently, and even someone racist, they have to imagine the world differently in order to, get out of the system that they're in. And it seems with Walton, we show that he has no color in an apartment.
I was just going to say that, yeah.
So he's a true colorblind.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. I noticed that his walls are just bland. Everything is bland. And what does he have for plants? He has dried cotton.
Yeah.
Dried cotton plants. So he has no color until that you have that one incredible scene, Mostafa, between Walton and Monet, as Monet is painting and he is trying to get Walton to remember his inner child, and he tells him, "Will you play the piano? Pretend that you're playing the piano with paint." And you have the two of them, handprints, fingerprints, mushing colors together all over this pristine white wall. And it is magical to watch that scene. The chemistry in that scene between Trey and Gary, what they bring to that scene is magical. It is beautiful to watch.
And it has a very tribal impact because, it represents the handprints in the cave.
Yes.
Right? And the idea was that, all that last of us is our memories. Sometimes we look back at thousands of years ago and we realize that all those people die at the end and all that is their story they tell. And I think now, 1,000 years from now, people are going to look at us and laugh at our racism and say these people like really fought over colors, That was maybe something like the same thing we look at like a lot of barbarian behaviors of human in 1,000 years ago. We were surprised and shocked, and I think we're going through enlightenment and things are getting better gradually, but hopefully we can achieve that understanding in this life while we're alive, not for other generations to look at us and say, judge us for the stories we told.
I have to ask you, Mostafa, because Magdalene is a painter, and she has some beautiful paintings that she's trying to sell. They were supposed to go into a gallery, and gallery shut down. So now she's on the sidewalk at night trying to sell her paintings, and then many of them she's hanging. Because I know you are also a painter. Are these your paintings?
Yes, those are my paintings. Actually, I selectively painted them for the film.
They're
and
beautiful.
some of them been exhibited at the galleries here, but I exclusively wanted to kind of paint them. And for me, it's a meditation when I paint, because film industry is very hard. It's like you have a budget to make film, but with this film, we had no government support or anything. You just made a budget independently. So sometimes when I cannot make a film, I paint, because that, all depends on me and the canvas, no one else. But it's still a way of telling a story, and you just tell one frame at a time.
Oh, I am in love with the one that is pink with the upside down heart.
Oh, yeah.
That I fell in love with the minute I saw it on screen.
That one is actually the family. It's mixed family, and it's their ashes, and it shows at the end of the day when we burn, our ashes are the same color. So regardless if it's the black mom and a white father and the kid is mixed, at the end, doesn't matter. All these colors end up being gray, and it talks about overall idea of you go back to nature, and to nature we are all the same.
I want to see more of your paintings. After seeing the ones you did for the film, I want to see more of your paintings. Working.
Yeah, I have actually. I have over 60 paintings and poetry that coming out in a book, and the poetry again was mine too. So I do a lot of painting and poetry, but this is something that I've been writing and painting for years, and I'm waiting for an opportunity, hopefully, to publish them. But all of them are about social issues, whether it's racism or climate change or other things that we're dealing with today. But I have over 300 poetry and 60 paintings, oil paintings that are original, and hopefully that would be my story to tell when the time comes. But for now, I make films, and here and there I have some of my paintings in my films, so that's my signature. I usually have my poetry and paintings in my film, because I like a poetic film where the audience remembers certain things, and you're not just being captured by the visual effects and the sound and all that. You sometimes have the moment of looking at it as a piece of art, not just entertainment.
Well, but this is very deliberate. Looking in Walton's apartment, looking in Magdalene and Monet's apartment, you have a big difference with your lighting. Magdalene and Monet, you've got light coming in the windows. We see that.
Yeah.
In Walton's apartment, his lights. He has lights turned on, but they're very dim, and we never see light coming through. The windows. So you really play with that, and your production designer Miles Engel does a beautiful job in each of these, making each of these just. You have Walton's that is so metaphorically closed off and closed in, and blanketed, eyes covered, shrouded. And then you have light coming in, bright white light, coming into Magdalene and Monet's apartment. Miles did an amazing job with the layouts and making use of the spaces.
Yeah, Miles was raised in New York, and I think his experience of color blindness, and also he had some experience with that, and as well as racism in New York versus producer who was raised in Vancouver. They have different ideas, and the idea of the sun really makes an impact. Where you have sun, you have hope. The idea of that the sun shines on all of us equally. It doesn't discriminate what color we are. The nature is just giving, and if you can have that same thing. There's a poem by Hafiz. He said, after all these years, the sun never tells the earth you owe me. Look what happens with a love like that. It can light up the sky. And
wow.
I think to me that was the idea of we can always be like the sun and have no expectation of what we give to the earth or to people who need us, the world would be a better place. So that was that. I just have to go back to production now because I'm in between filming another project.
Goodness.
Right now I'm doing a film for what's happening in Iran with the woman uprising in Iran and the protests have been happening. Yeah, it's my next project and it's called For Hair. And it's a very moving project about some Iranian students that challenge the government, and they want to go out and experience their freedom and let their hair out. But a lot of twists in it. So that's what I'm doing next. But I wanted to kind of let people know on April 5th, our film will be out. 4th.
Get that date right, Mostafa. It's April 4th on digital.
April 4th, yeah. It will be all across different platforms, and I hope people can order now. You can pre-order on Apple and different platforms, and hopefully they can watch and enjoy the film and have a new experience.
It definitely is a new experience, and it is a very emotional one. I can't thank you enough for taking a break in production, Mustafa, to join me here today. Now, when will you have For Her done? When can I be on the lookout for that?
I think the hope is to have it in May out for the festival. Sorry, Toronto Film Festival in September.
Very nice.
Hopefully, we submit it. We'll submit to Toronto, and we'll have their first screening. But I'll let you know when it comes out, and I definitely would love to talk to you about that as well.
Absolutely.
Every film I've done, it's been about social issues, and I hope I continue to make more awareness about different topics. And as a citizen of the world, I think when you feel like at the end of it, we always identify ourselves with man, woman, person of color, whatever. But behind all that, you're human. Beyond all that, you're all human, and trying to have a human experience in this body. But I think it's very important to, connect with all the different people and see the similarities rather than our differences, because that's the only way we can move forward. And I hope that, this film helps people to move forward and, unveil their true colors.
Well, there's nothing like seeing the world through the eyes of a child. And that is definitely what we have here with Colorblind. Mustafa.
Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much. And
it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you.
A joy. I can't wait till we talk again.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks,
Bye.
Mustafa. Bye-bye. And that was Mustafa Keshvari talking about Colorblind. It's an exquisite film. And this whole idea of science, mathematically computing what colors look like to those in colorblindness. It's amazing. But it's the emotion, it's the metaphor. It's everything that this film says. I can't encourage you enough to April 4th on all the digital platforms. Do yourself a favor. And at the very least, you're going to fall in love with little Trey Maridati, who plays the 9-year-old Monet. You're going to love him. He is a kid to watch. Okay, so now we're going to switch gears again and get back into the groove of spinning gold. And when we broke for Mustafa to call in, we were in the middle of Tim talking to us about the story, the story he wanted to tell. And, did he want to direct? How did he come to direct? Did he just want to tell a story? Did he want to direct? So let's pick it up right now with more from Tim Bogart talking Spinning Gold.
That was too close. But I did think I was perhaps uniquely capable of finding out the truth about him as a writer. And so really it began really for me as a writer and as a producer. And I would say for a good chunk of time, maybe a decade, one of my most important jobs was just saying no to people trying to get the rights. But ultimately in 1999, we finally set it up at a studio for the first time. And at that point, it became great. So we've now set this up. I guess I now have to take it more seriously. I've been talking about it for years, just in the context of, let me tell you some wonderful stories about my dad. Let me tell you the greatest hits about my father's life. But suddenly I had to actually write it. And so I then embarked on this incredible journey that any child should be blessed to have, which was a forensic investigation of who my father was. And so many people opened up their hearts and souls to tell me incredible stories about what he meant to them. And I mean from the Clive Davises to the Donna Summers and everyone in between. Everybody opened up their hearts to tell me what he meant to them, what he meant to music. And the more I learned and the crazier the stories revealed themselves to be, the more clear it was to me that I just had this incredible story to tell. And as a storyteller, how could I not?
In talking with all of these other people who opened up to you about your dad, Tim, what was the most surprising thing that you learned or discovered about him?
I think the most surprising thing for me was just how close to disaster he always was. as a 12-year-old when he died, although I spent so much time with him, even though I was quite young, he really was an incredible clear force. I feel like I did know the essence of him. But I knew him as the success. I knew him as the guy who had created this incredible label. I mean, when Casablanca really explodes, it's 1977, so I'm 7 years old. So my formative years with him, it was a miraculous success. And I think, like, hopefully, most people who see this movie will walk into it and go, well, Kiss, of course they were a success. And Donna Summer, of course she was a success. None of that was true. And how close he was to constant disaster and the incredible, frankly, balls he had to just keep betting on himself, that I did not know. I knew about his force of nature. I knew how people just loved this man and they gravitated towards him. I didn't know how dangerous his life was to constant disaster. I didn't know how deeply he was involved in the mob. I didn't know how on a daily basis he was on the verge of bankruptcy. So that to me was quite surprising in that he put on a show even for us as family ultimately. Everybody just saw what he wanted us to see. I thought that was fascinating.
Yeah, a lot of that stuff was like revelatory. It really was.
Revolutionary, absolutely. I mean, I always love whenever somebody thinks about Love to Love You Baby, they just assume that must have been a smash. But for that, I mean, I do the scene in the movie, and it really was that scene, and maybe I shouldn't have been in that party. Maybe my parents shouldn't have let me, but I was. That's what happened. This song came out and flopped and was forgotten about, and someone accidentally put it on at a party years later. But for that, there's no Donna Summer. But for that, there's no disco. That stuff I don't think people know. I also don't think people know one of the things I love so much, and I always kind of talk about the film as, or the story rather, it really was the island of misfit toys. Neil Bogart was Neil Bogart for the Brooklyn Project. Gene Simmons was Chaim Witz, and Paul Simon was Stanley Eisen, and Donna Summer was Donna Gaines, and Bill Withers was installing toilet seats on airplanes. None of these people should have succeeded. And somehow they found each other, and as a result of that, this fairy tale happened. It was, I think, a revelation for anyone who loves these songs but have no idea where the artists actually came from who ultimately created them.
Mm-hmm. Now, at what point did you decide that you were going to tackle this story as a director? Because this is where your talents just explode, Tim. Explode.
Okay. Thank you. It was very late in the game. I, as a writer, crafted the first draft, a very long first draft, 180 pages, pretty early after 1999. And then we went through a whole host of potential stars to play him, potential directors. And every time we would work with another director, when I was at one studio, then another studio, we would keep developing it further away from what the original idea was. And ultimately, the studios or the financiers at that point would come back and say, no, you need to get it back to what you originally had, Tim. So there was this connection that people seemed to have with my vision of it. And ultimately, appropriately, anytime another filmmaker came on, they wanted to make it their own. But they all seemed to be focused on different things. Certainly the sex, drugs, and rock and roll of it was attractive to people. They always loved the excess. I never thought that was the story. Not that I shied away from it. I just thought, as the character says in the film, it was sex before it was deadly. It was drugs, but it was the 70s.
Yeah.
These things were not bad things. I actually thought a lot of my father's flaws, of which he had many, were ultimately his superhero traits. If he wasn't a gambler, he would never have succeeded. If he wasn't an addict, he would never have succeeded. But every time a new filmmaker came on board, they took it in a very different direction. And it's not that we were trying to protect like the image of my father, because again, as I said, I think his flaws made him most interesting. It's just that it wasn't the story that I thought audiences wanted to hear. And over the years, as a filmmaker, I was setting up other projects to direct. I just kept kind of pushing aside this one. And it was finally after I finally decided to part ways with Justin Timberlake, who was attached for a while, to play my father, because he was just way too consumed with his music at the time, and it was going to take too long, that I finally just said, it's just time, and I'm going to do what he did, which is bet on myself.
I think you made a very, very wise decision, because we learn about the industry from your father's perspective and what these artists went through to become superstars, but we learn so much about the man and who he was, and his love for his family, his love for his core group of friends who were with him and supported him in his crazy ideas. That is such a fascinating aspect. And then you build around that. The way you've structured this film visually is beyond outstanding. Your use of color, you're spanning 3 decades. You got 50s, 60s, 70s happening in here. Your hair and makeup and costuming, off the charts. Perfection. Absolute period perfection.
So many people, I have felt, when you look at these biopics, specifically in this period, I've always felt most people over period the period. Mm-hmm. I think most projects that have been done about the 1970s look at the 70s as a joke, look at the style as a joke. But anybody who's actually there, who actually was in Studio 54, people looked great. This is where some of the best designers of our current day came from. So I think it was always an odd, kind of easy path to take to make fun of that period. And I just thought there's a reason that period has sustained. There's a reason it keeps coming back. I think the style was actually quite extraordinary. The music was clearly extraordinary. And so setting out from the design standpoint, it was incredibly important to us to not over-period the period. Yes, people have big hair, but, not that big. And yes, the collars were wider, but not that wide. And that was a very important thing for us, was to not make it a joke, because the people who lived it, I say this in the movie in different ways, but it really is true. There's not a single person I interviewed, and again, Clive Davis, Barry Gordy, all the music guys, almost verbatim. I would start these interviews, hundreds and hundreds of hours of interviews. I would start these interviews and say, just first tell me how it felt. I just want to know what it felt like to be there at the time. And I swear almost every single one of them put the do not disturb on their phone, turned to me and said, don't know how I survived it. Don't know if I'd do it again. That was the greatest fucking time of my life. And that became the compass of this movie. It wasn't a joke. It was the greatest time of these people's lives, which meant there was magic there. And that's really what I set out to celebrate.
You definitely do that. And you do that with your visual design, your work with Byron. The camera work is just exemplary, Tim. And the visual tonal bandwidth of the film. We have these very distinct looks happening in the film. You've got concerts happening. You've got a gospel church. You've got studio sessions. You've got the quiet, intimate moments, such as Gene Simmons and Neil on the bus, which is one of the most beautiful.
Byron, who I had the honor of doing a film right before this, and then I just finished another film with him after we did Spinning Gold. And the one thing that Byron and I will never do anything without him. I mean, we're just such a wonderful partnership. And he, very, very early on, it was very clear to me that the best way to tell this movie was as if my father was the director, not me. If my father was a cinematographer, not me. If my father designed the costumes, because ultimately he just tells the most fabulous version of those stories. Once we took that premise, that we're really seeing this film through the purpose, because ultimately, because you've seen the film, you know how it ends, it is ultimately a guy wrestling with the sum of his life. And therefore, he's offering up, but this happened and this happened in the way that he remembers it.
Right.
And very early on, Byron and I looked at that. So that means when it's dark, it's the darkest dark there ever was. When it's light, it's the lightest light there ever was. When it's blue, it's the bluest blue. When it's loud, it's the loudest loud. And once we took that kind of approach, the color and the tapestry of the picture really came into incredible clarity for us. And every scene just really started with, what does he want us to see? What does he not want us to see in this moment? And how do we serve that vision? And that really became the compass for Byron and I. And Byron's work was just really breathtaking.
I love the fluidity of the camera with this. It has the same fluidity as the music almost. And
well, I don't know if Byron told you this. It was, we always thought that was really important, and early on, this was Byron's idea, the idea that we would give all the crew, the focus pullers, everybody who could, the yapper, the key grip, we would give them headphones. And even if the scene didn't have music in it, we would choose music that felt like it might have been playing around that time. So from the moment people came on the set every day, there was music playing. The crew was constantly being moved by the motion and the rhythm of that music, and we absolutely believed that that informed the way the film ultimately looked.
I totally...
The operator listened to these songs as they were moving the crane, and it really mattered.
I totally agree, because you feel it. If you're looking for it just to point out camera movement, you can see some of the fluidity and some of the camera angles that are chosen, but you really feel it in tandem with the music. And I just think that is a spectacular way for this film to be presented. Now, I love the use of red. I love how you use the red wash. I mean, the metaphor there of how he sees things, it gets a wash and a red glow, but that also equates to everything he does is a gamble. Everything he does is a risk. It's red, stop.
Yep.
And I love a lot of the metaphor that you have inserted and integrated within this film. It just adds, it elevates the film to another level, Tim.
Oh, thank you.
Just absolutely amazing. Now, I'm curious here, how challenging was the editing of this film?
So challenging. So challenging. It was the hardest thing by far in the 30+ years I've been doing this stuff for me to edit. And in large part because we always knew we were bouncing around in time, but ultimately, what did the audience need to start investing in this guy they have absolutely no knowledge about? And we changed the structure editorially a number of times. I did, which I like doing. I know some filmmakers don't. I did an audience test screen so early. I did it maybe 4 weeks after wrap, just to test the basic construct of were people following just the basic storyline, and the answer was they were not. We got that loud and clear, and we had opened in a different way in Buddha, and there was too much information being thrown around. So we very early on realized that playing with the structures would be crucial. And because we did this film independently, we were blessed with the ability to do it on our own timeline. And so one of the things I think is probably the greatest asset to the film is we kept taking breaks and walking away from it. You know, there was a period where we would just stop for a second and wait 4 weeks and literally not look at a frame and then come back. And that was so informative to be able to give it some time to ultimately reveal itself to us. How we use music to drive the narrative of it was so important, but one song could overlay 6 or 7 different themes if we did it correctly. So I work with this extraordinary editor, Derek Ambrosi, who I never worked with before, and he just brought such a level of artistry and an understanding of music, and I would say so much of the editorial pacing is very much a result of his extraordinary gift.
You have some incredible montages happening in here. And as you say, the scenes one song could overlap 6 or 7 situations. The Beth concert scene is beautiful. It's ethereal. It's stunning. You've got the bad girls into Dim All the Lights, right into the Hollywood Bowl concert with the behind the scenes, on the stage, distance. I mean, just absolutely stunning montages, and I'm a big montage fan. I love the old Busby Berkeley's with montages and geometry, and so I was just in little piggy heaven with a lot of this here, Tim.
And you know, and to that, what you think came out at the end, and it sounds like you felt this as well, is the montages did always seem to drive the story, though,
yes,
pretty significantly. I mean, I love the Gladys Knight Midnight Train to Georgia sequence where we are transporting him. That song metaphorically and actually transported him from his New York life to his Los Angeles life. And ultimately, in that scene, we physically transport him from New York to Los Angeles. We physically transport him from one woman to the other woman. So it was so important that the song gave us the vehicle to drive so much more story than perhaps normally would be the case. it's also the case, we have so many scenes, I forget how many, there's so many scenes in this movie, and the only reason they fit is because of the construct with the music, I think.
I agree. And then piggybacking on that is you have Justin Gray, who's doing a score that underlies all of the needle drops. And then I have to give kudos, your sound people did, with the sound mix and edit, did a beautiful job so that we hear the songs, we hear score. There's wonderful soft edits in the mix that take us from one thing into another. Dialogue is never obscured.
Justin Gray, who I've worked with for many, many years, but this certainly was, the biggest thing that we've done together. And Justin also worked with my youngest baby brother, Evan, and the two of them did the score. And early on, there was that great challenge of, how do you put a score in the middle of a movie with all these incredibly important songs? And the premise was, it all has to feel like it's one thing. And the score has to feel like it's part of the needle drops, and the needle drops have to then become score. And so that architecturally was a decision early on, even in the writing. But what Justin and Evan were able to do in composing that score just fulfilled every one of those hopes. And then, yes, the mix done by wonderful mixer in Los Angeles, Brian Berger, was just fabulous. And for an independent movie, we did about 20 days. I mean, this was a very important thing, the soundscape of this film. So we really knocked ourselves out on the mix, and it certainly shows, I think.
Oh,
the work we did is one.
It definitely does. And of course, this is where your casting is also so important, because you got to have people that can sell these songs that are being portrayed and presented to us. I mean, you talk about Tyler Parks.
And not just the song. Taylor hasn't done a whole lot acting-wise. I think what an incredibly courageous performance she gives.
Yeah.
She just totally sings and plays, and it's just extraordinary what she does. Lettucey had not done much from acting, and boy, she slayed it. And Jason Derulo was some of my favorite scenes in the film. I mean, he just knocks it out of the park with those scenes. I love those Ron Isley scenes. So I do think that the music artist is very important early on, too. And I know some people will disagree with this when they see the film. I never wanted this film to be mimicry. I didn't want to mimic the 60s. I didn't want to mimic the 70s. And I did not want to mimic Donna Summer. I didn't want to mimic Kiss. I wanted people who had the essence of who these people were. And then my bet was the audience will enjoy who these humans are, not because they look exactly like Donna Summer or that person is exactly like Gene Simmons or exactly like Ron Isley. But if you're going to cast the current Ron Isley was a revolutionary act. Was bold, broke boundaries. That's Jason Derulo. So I looked at the essence of who these people were, really without any concern what they look like, knowing that sometimes we do get pushback on that. And I'm so thrilled with those choices.
Casting is just impeccable. Granted, a film like Bohemian Rhapsody, Rami Malek transformed into Freddie Mercury.
Sure.
There is no doubt about it. Just like Quillam Lee, a dead ringer for Brian May at that point in time. But here, there's enough of an essence. It's the essence. And with the costuming and wigs, you believe, because it's also, we're more concerned with the sound. As these people get introduced and we start hearing them, and it's what they brought, it's the sound that your dad brought and elicited from them and created. And that's more driving than a mimicry.
Well, and I think part of that, is the decision also was we weren't casting Gene Simmons because Gene Simmons was a character.
Yep.
We were casting Chaim Witz. So Casey Life playing Chaim Witz, I wasn't casting Gene Simmons. I was casting the guy underneath that. And I wasn't casting Donna Summer, I was casting LaDonna Gaines. And so in each one of those instances, I was looking for it to be a slight turn left or right from what the normal expectation was. And frankly, we were doing the same with the music. Very important decision early on. You can't beat Bill Withers' Lean on Me Master. You can't beat it. You shouldn't try to beat it. I wanted to know what it sounded like the first time he ever sang it. We were looking to do the first drafts of music history, and once you do that, you're able to open it up to the imperfections, to the evolution, and it gave our actors who portrayed these artists the opportunity to truly make it their own without claiming that that was the final version. Because we didn't show the final versions, we showed the journey on the way, which was really what these characters were celebrating is how is music created by music lovers? What is that journey, and what are the sacrifices that are required to do so? Not let's just hear another, the same version of Midnight Train to Georgia we've heard 100 times, although it's spectacular. I wanted to look through a different lens.
Well, you certainly achieved that. I found that the kiss sequences particularly effective because everybody has such, and by the way, I bought their original single when nobody was buying it. And I have it. So, but to see that, to see the rawness that you brought out, and the greatest transformation is LaDonna Gaines into Donna Summer. We see the shy girl, the trepidation. She's frustrated. I've been down this road before. It's not going to work. Nobody buys the record. We see all that, and that's really that's part of the meat and potatoes of this film, is that journey.
Well, as you mentioned Kiss, I think that's really, a thing that I knew from the beginning. I always thought Kiss would be where potentially we just fall down because it's so easy to look at them as a joke. But they're performing 40 years later. There's nothing joking about this band. Nobody worked harder than them in their day, and nobody works harder than them today. So the idea that you could easily fall into the mimicry of that was always concerning. We wanted to embrace the rawness and the commitment these guys had to their music, which was absolutely true and profound. You don't live 40 years without it. The other thing I knew we kind of, interestingly for the crazy rabid Kiss fans, and I've seen some of this already online, that's not the makeup or that's not the logo. And it's not about whether we have the rights to use it. This movie takes place from 1974 to 1977. They were figuring it out. We went through great pains early on working with Gene and working with Paul and working with Peter to see what their makeup looked like before they figured it out. And that's what we were paying homage to. It was the creation of history, not the end result of it. So, it was an interesting choice, and I know we've got some people going, that's not right. But it actually was absolutely right. If you were at that concert at Cobo Arena that year, that's what it looked like. And that's so much about that journey that we were trying to capture. And hopefully people will see it for that.
And I love that you mentioned Gene's involvement, Paul's involvement, because Gene Simmons, if anybody has ever followed him or listened to many interviews he's given over the decades, he talks about the early days and finding themselves.
Absolutely. And early, actually really, really, really early, Gene was even going to be involved producing for a while. And so, he spent a lot of time with me telling me, stories that didn't yet make it at that point into the different biographies and the different books that they would do. And when we started the design of the film, Dean and Paul were in contact with our costume designers and our makeup designers and the people who created, the guitar that Paul used in that opening scene at the Century Plaza. So they were very extraordinarily helpful and wanted to see it done right. They had a great affinity for my father and what he meant to them, and I was blessed with their just wonderful support along the way.
I have to ask about Jeremy Jordan. You got to save the best for last.
And boy, is he the best. I will tell you, different than anything I've ever cast, I kept casting everybody else. I cast Cecil. I cast Freddie Crocker. I cast Ron Isley. I could not cast the person playing my father. And I was actually on the verge, because we finally put together the whole cast. I was ready to make the film. I still hadn't identified who would play my father. Not surprising. That was a tough nut for me to find. And I was about to cast a rather well-known actor who I'm sure would have been lovely. And I had my cold feet the morning we were about to sort of close the deal. And I called Larry Mark, who's a producer on the film, and I said, Larry, the end monologue, which is so important, this guy says, you all know Donna, George Clinton, Village People, but not one of you knows me. And I thought that was so important that this audience not know this person if we were going to take them on a journey to discover who this person was. And in a crazy last-minute move, I said, who's the greatest showman on Broadway right now? Because my father ultimately was a showman. And Larry Marcus said, Jeremy Jordan. I had never heard of Jeremy Jordan. I went on YouTube that night. I spent about 6 hours going down a rabbit hole of one extraordinary performance after the other. I jumped on a red eye the next night to get to New York, demanded that he meet with me through his agents. He hadn't done anything remotely like this in film, but I just saw in him so much of the showman that I thought my father was, and it was absolutely the most important and successful creative choice of my career.
He's brilliant. His performance is Oscar-worthy, I got to tell you.
I agree. I think he's an absolutely remarkable talent.
And I just have to say thank you very much for the Last Dance production number. Louis B. Mayer is smiling down from the heavens with that one. That is so Hollywood. That is so a musical at its finest. Just fabulous.
Oh, thank you so much.
Tim, thank you so much. This has been an absolute joy to get to speak with you about a film that I am so in love with. It's not even funny. It's spectacular. I hope we get to chat again in the future about your upcoming projects.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And that was my exclusive interview with Tim Bogart, writer-director of Spinning Gold and son of the legendary Neil Bogart. March 31st, Friday, the film is out. I've already seen it, but I'm going to pay money to see it again. It is spectacular. If you lived the 70s, if you lived the era, if you know anything at all about Casablanca Records or the history of Kiss, Donna Summer, the Isley Brothers, the Village People, you're going to love this film and you want to see it. If you don't know anything about it, what Neil Bogart did helped shape the music industry as we know it today. This is one of my favorite films of the year, and I have no doubt it will stay there. Jeremy Jordan is award-worthy. Award-worthy. I hope that come awards time this fall, people don't forget about him. But just an outstanding film. And I just can't imagine the trepidation, the angst, internal angst that Tim felt telling his dad's story from what would be his dad's POV. There's humor, there's heart. The cast is amazing. Besides Jeremy Jordan, you've got Michelle Monaghan, who plays Neil Bogart's first wife, Beth. Jason Isaacs plays his father. Lindsay Fonseca plays girlfriend and wife number 2. Joyce actually was a manager of Kiss for a while. Long-time heavy guy. Vincent Pastore is in it as Big Joey. Tyler Parks is LaDonna Gaines / Donna Summer. Wiz Khalifa as George Clinton. It's just amazing. Absolutely amazing. As I said, in theaters, it's out on Friday. April 4th, on digital, you can check out Mustafa Keshvari's film Colorblind. And I have to give a huge, huge, huge shout out and atta girl, yay, to my gal pal Lisa Scottolini, whose new historical novel, Loyalty, about the rise of the mafia in Sicily, is out today. Get it, read it. And hopefully in the coming months, I'm going to have some big Lisa Scottolini news on her book, What Happened to the Bennetts, which has a Hollywood option attached to it. So things are moving on that. But that is all the time we have today. I was not going to not let you hear all of Tim Bogart's interview on the show today. But you're also going to be able to hear it and see images of these great, the costumes, the looks, everything. It is in editing right now for a video edit, with an audio video edit. slideshow that hopefully will be done today. And Pam's making a face in there. And I'll have that out hopefully later tonight. This week, I will also have my interview out with Byron Werner. It's a long one, hour-long, cinematographer of Spinning Gold, where we really dive into the nuts and bolts of the visuals of this film. So, until next week, I'm Debbie Elias. This is Behind the Lens.